Behind the Shades.
There's so many misconceptions about breastfeeding that, and it's not even just the people who go into it without taking courses. I took 2 separate courses preparing to breastfeed and felt so prepared and was blindsided by how hard it was. And what I realized, and I'm an educator, even before I did lactation work, I was an instructor, and I realized that hospital, especially hospital education, prenatal about lactation is primarily trying to persuade moms to breastfeed. So that information is very different in terms of persuasive tactics and information than really telling you what it's going to be like. If they're trying to persuade someone who's unsure about breastfeeding to nurse, they're not going to talk about cracked nipples. They're not going to talk about how uncomfortable it is and how, no, you have to nurse every 2 hours for months sometimes, and the lack of sleep, And so that's why so many parents are blindsided, because they're not shown the reality. Some of that comes from, like you said, cultural stigma. Some of it comes from cultural norms and generational differences that, there's our parents were not pressured to breastfeed as much as we are. And so there's pressures from maybe our parents to say, just give a bottle. There's pressures of doing it all, right? There's this misconception that we can exclusively breastfeed and go back to work for 40 hours a week. And that's really, really hard to do. And so it sets moms up to feel like they're failing in every which way. And breastfeeding, you birth your baby, and if you plan to breastfeed, it is the very first experience of being a parent. And so if it doesn't go well, it is traumatizing for many moms, because you feel like you're failing. And this one thing that's supposed to be so easy and natural is hard. And if you are stuck in that place and you don't have care, then you don't know what to do. And so many moms end up transitioning to formula, which is, I'm not here to bash on formula. I use formula. Formula has a place. And that's including if moms don't want to nurse at all, because I'm in the position of, it is your body, your right to choose what to do. And that's part of the missing link as well of the discussion, because we're so far into baby health, which is obviously important, but we're neglecting the mother's health, mental and physical health in the conversation. And so that's what I'm trying to bring to the table. Besides, like I said, I focus on extended nursing now, but I also provide care for prenatal and immediate postpartum care. And what I did was created a 10-week course, which sounds very, very intense, but it is laid out with everything you may need to know about the first weeks of breastfeeding. And so that guide and that online course, self-guided, helps moms who know they want to breastfeed and want to succeed, and they want to know what they don't know. Because that's what I heard over and over again when I talk to moms is, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what I needed to know. And so I set out to try to answer some of those questions. And go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, so for someone like me who is trying to understand this, because a man's perspective is a little bit different, right? The baby is not suckling on my nipple, and I'm not a part of that interaction. So when I'm listening to what you're saying, it makes complete sense to me. But how does someone like me, who's not directly involved in the feeding, how can I support, let's say, my wife or my girlfriend from that perspective?
I love that question. And it's something actually that I do cover, because I think unintentionally, partners might affect the nursing relationship by actually wanting to be involved in a good way, right? Like parents and dads have been so much more involved in the last decade than they ever have been before. They want to participate. There's an equality, right? Like we go into parenting, and I say we because this was our perception as well of 50-50, right? Like we're in this. But quickly we realized that when it came to feeding our child, it really couldn't be. So what the dad's role needs to be is not taking care of the baby, it's taking care of mom. It's feeding mom, it's making the meals, it's making sure she showers, because she may not do that on her own. She may not think about it because she's so focused. It's really doing everything else. It can be mom nurses, but then you take baby, you change the diaper, change the clothes, swaddle the baby, shush the baby, put the baby to sleep. Maybe dad becomes the pro at sleeping, right? My husband, he was the pro swaddler. And so I just let him do that thing. And so he could feel confident in something that I can be a part of it. So what I see often that kind of goes awry is the need or desire to bring in a bottle so dad can participate in feedings, usually at night, because there's this thought, well, if dad feeds the bottle at night, mom can sleep. But the problem is, especially in the beginning stages, mom has to nurse. And if she doesn't nurse, she has to pump. And there are two reasons for that, is because either she needs to keep up her supply. So it's getting into the technical side of it a little bit. There's supply and demand. So the more you breastfeed, the more your body gets the signal that it needs more milk. So if you stop nursing, your body is going to produce less milk. So if you start giving a formula bottle in the night, that's fine if you choose to do that. But if you are expecting to continue making the same amount of milk, then you're going to be, surprised when all of a sudden your pump output is less, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And that's a beautiful way to clarify it, because we all have a role to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you raise a good point that we can kind of confuse the requirements, right? Because this child is new. This child doesn't know how to protect itself, provide for itself. And both people involved, they're probably new to this, especially if it's their first child.
Totally. I was just about to say the baby is new at it, but so are the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that there are, I don't want to say boundaries, but they're well-established duties, right?
Yeah. Yes. And that can, again, it's hard to fully know going into it because every situation is different, but especially depending on the birth. A vaginal birth is going to be unmedicated, is going to maybe look different, and the partner's role would look different than a partner who had an epidural or a C-section. The C-section is going to need the most care and support, right? And they're not going to be able to be as mobile as someone who maybe didn't have that. And so that's why I say it depends on the whole situation. But yeah, going into it with the mindset of mom's job is only nursing. Like that's how I want you to instead of everything's 50-50, the dad has to participate in the feedings. No, dad can do everything else. And mom's job is this. If that's what she wants, and her goal is to nurse exclusively, and that let her do that thing, help her get good at it. And how do you help her get good at it? Usually providing the care. If she's struggling, like for my husband, for example, I was struggling in the beginning, and I can get into my story here in a couple minutes, but he's reminded me that there was a lactation clinic at our hospital. Totally out of my mind. Didn't even think about it. I'm like, oh, and got me the number so I could call and talk to them. So those are ways dads can support the mom in nursing. It's not with a bottle unless that's part of the holistic goal, meaning there's not always a lot of talk of supplementing while breastfeeding. It can happen. It's just usually you need to have it not happen in the very beginning in the first weeks because the milk supply has to establish, and then there can be adjustment.